All right, I'm headed to CrossFit here. It's another super cold day. I went to Reddit for a topic, and it's kind of related to some stuff I was talking about in one of the videos yesterday or the day before. I make a lot of videos now, so I don't know what day it is. Um, and I'm gonna go through this idea of like mid-level and senior engineer to touch on a couple of things. And I think I feel like I've been having conversations recently where this has been coming up, and it felt like a natural kind of thing to talk about. The heater in this car smells very bad out of nowhere. That's very odd. Oh, it's the... I just turned on the seat heater. Okay, it's still early. Okay, so if you have questions that you want answered, leave them in the comments. Happy to respond to that. Or if you want to write something that's more in-depth, keep it anonymous. Look for Dev Leader on social media. Dev Leader is my main YouTube channel with fully edited videos, tutorials, especially for C# programming. And a lot less rambling because I have the editor actually keep me on track. But this channel is a lot more stream of consciousness, so sit back and enjoy. But the idea, primarily, when I talk about mid-level and senior, and really like level progressions, there's two major things that I sort of regularly talk about, and that's the scope of impact of the work you're doing continues to grow. So, if you take one end of the spectrum, someone who's very junior, you have basically like smaller features or bug fixes that probably someone else already understands, and they've basically assigned them to you because they want to help ensure that you can build up the confidence that you can be delivering on these types of things. In terms of ambiguous work, though, you're probably getting little of it. Not to say that zero or that you can't handle it, but generally people are giving you work that's like, kind of like I was saying, like it's not complex and it's well scoped. And that way they can help ensure that they can help you, they can assist you, and you can kind of build up that momentum, typically. And so if you go to the opposite end of the spectrum for someone that is a sort of high-level individual contributor, they're generally leading projects that are like effectively organizational or company-wide. So they have the scope of impact of their work is very great. And of course, there's everything in the middle, right? But the point is that the scope of impact continues to grow as your level increases. The other thing that I always talk about is sort of like, I don't know if I can call it like your circle of influence, but in order to be delivering on very high impact work, you essentially need to be able to like rally people with you to be able to accomplish that work. You need to be able to effectively lead those projects. And that's usually how I try to describe this element of like your circle of influence. Okay, so if you try to like just do really big organizational impact and then just try to take it all on by yourself, depending on the work you're doing, that could be like essentially infeasible or impossible, because you need other teams to be bought in and like participating in those work streams. So those are the two major things that I usually talk about. But something that's come up recently, and it's making me kind of rethink, it didn't make me rethink how I define it, but it made me realize I'm not like calling out something that's probably important. That once I was hearing it, I was like, you know what, maybe it's worth sticking a third thing in there that's I don't know, a little bit more clear about even going from junior to mid-level to senior kind of thing. Because one might argue that you'll have mid-level engineers that are already starting to do projects that are a little bit more ambiguous. They might be cross-team, and then I'm seeing some conversations online or having questions around this where it's like, well, I'm already doing that. Isn't that senior already? Like the lines sometimes feel a little blurred before mid-level and senior. And the element that I want to talk about here is ownership. And if I'm saying that word and you're like, oh, I watched the video the other day, that was not the only reason. It was a fresh reminder, but even I think yesterday at work, it came up in like literally 2 or 3 completely unrelated conversations, and I'm like, okay, it's a sign. I should I should probably talk about this a little bit. But I wanted to talk about ownership because I think that is actually one of the uh, differentiators when we start talking about like a senior level. So, like, what does it mean to take ownership on something? And the way I wanted to maybe walk through an example of like, I think we can demonstrate where ownership isn't, and then maybe like talk through how that could look. So I'm going to use a anonymized sort of pseudo real example, but let's assume that we have a engineer that's working on something, and we have timelines in place. They're not necessarily like a super hard deadline. Like if things are off by a day, like that's fine. Things are off by 2 days. It's not the end of the world, right? But we have a rough idea. It's going to be, let's say 4 to 5 days of work. And if we spill a little over and it's like a full week of work or something, that's fine. And let's assume then that when this person goes to do their work, they've essentially completed like their coding part. They've written unit tests. They feel good about it, and now they're saying, okay, I want to like put it into the harness that exists, the tooling for like integration testing. I want to run this thing kind of live in some type of environment that's safe to do so. And this is like a core part of their testing. It's a core part of everyone's workflow. So they go to do this, and then they get a result back that's saying like the infrastructure there's not capacity for it, and they're going, okay, that's weird, but like it's just not working. Okay, like let me try again. Okay, still not working. And then basically they reach this point where they go, well, that's a step I have to do, and it's not working. Like, what steps do I take? And this is where I start to think that the element of ownership comes up, because what can happen here is that you can take a little bit of ownership and you go, okay, I know that this other team owns this infrastructure that's telling me, hey, look, like there's not enough available, or it's not working, whatever the error happens to be. So some other team owns that. Maybe like I should contact them. So they contact them, and the other team's like, yeah, like basically not really a good fix for it right now. It might work if you keep trying, but like, it's not something that we have a solution for that's going to fix it 100%. So the person goes, okay, they try their thing again, still doesn't work. And now they're kind of like, well, I guess either I'm stuck or we acknowledge that we're not testing. And they kind of like have these two options that are like, neither of them are really great. Or they sit there, and the third option is they go, okay, I'm going to, I'll wait, maybe tomorrow it works. And then they try it tomorrow and it doesn't work. And then they say, okay, well, maybe tomorrow it works. And then they try it another day after, it still doesn't work. Now the deadline or the timeline is being pushed out. So in this example I'm giving here, there's like a little bit of ownership. Like, let me go contact to like the team that is responsible for the thing I'm using. But what's happening is that in terms of owning a successful project deliverable, that's starting to slip. So you could either be like the one example I was saying, they just say, okay, I guess we're not testing. Okay, maybe that's your quality. And this obviously is a contrived example, so obviously it's going to depend on, the rest of how you feel confident in testing. But let's assume that you're dropping out this major part of testing. Okay, so a potential quality dip. If you're going to sit there and keep trying, and you've done it for a couple days and it's still not holding out, proving to be a possibility, and now your timeline's slipping. So the reason I'm saying this is only partial ownership is because it's like, these are just things that you're sort of reacting to. It's only reactionary. right? Someone said, hey, you could keep trying it, and you go, okay, I guess this is my only option. I will retry. Doesn't work, so your reaction to that is, I will wait and retry later. It's better than not doing anything. To just say, like, I guess there's nothing to do, and then literally just sit there blocked. At a minimum, we'd want to raise awareness. But I say this is like minimal ownership, because if we're looking at our criteria for success, and that's going to include well-written code, it's going to include testing coverage, this kind of stuff, then that stuff needs to get done. The other thing is, we talked about the timeline for it, right? So that's also something that's, it was agreed upon, so that's part of the project's success. And you might be listening to this. In some cases, maybe for you have more flexible deadlines and stuff. I'm just giving you a specific example here that's contrived. So if those are the criteria for success, if you're taking ownership, the idea behind taking ownership is that you're saying, regardless of who else is involved, I need to remain responsible for delivering on the success criteria. So if you're in this situation where some other team is not, like the system is kind of stopping you from testing, and that's a core part, instead of saying, like, it's just their fault, like the timeline's behind because it's their fault, or we had to skip testing altogether because it's their fault, that's not taking ownership. That's placing blame, right? Instead, there's cops flying by. No lights, but they're flying. Instead of doing that, if we reverse like the way we're looking at this, and it's like, okay, we have a dependency in this case. We've contacted the owners of that dependency, and it's not going how we'd like. You still need to be responsible for the quality. You still need to be responsible for the timeline. So what are you doing? What are you doing about that? The reason I gave the examples and said it was minimal ownership is because in the one case, you're at least reaching out to the responsible owners of that infrastructure. That's minimal ownership, better than none. But that's addressing like the symptom of what you're experiencing. It's not actually saying, okay, like, we tried that, it's still not working. You still need to be responsible for your quality metric and your timeline. So what are you going to do? And when I've had some conversations about this recently, it's really about, like, where ownership really starts to shine is that you're like, number one, you can't be placing blame on people and just kind of removing yourself. It often means that you're taking additional action. It might mean getting very creative. It might mean, pushing through some extra work that wasn't really planned for. But ultimately, the goal is that you have something to deliver. Oh man, you gotta speed up so I can merge. Or not. You can wait back there. So in this case, right, like to walk through like something that maybe is creative, is thinking about what type of testing is going to be done on that infrastructure, and then saying, well, why are we doing that testing, right? Like, what confidence do those tests give us? And if we acknowledge that we cannot use that infrastructure to get that confidence, what else can we be doing to get that confidence? Is this something that we could act like, based on our product or service, we could go run it locally on someone's machine or in another dev test environment or something? And then are we still able to exercise those paths? It might have been more automatic and more repeatable on the infrastructure, but if we don't have access to that, it's just not working, and we really feel we want that coverage, maybe we should try it this way. You could also be asking yourself, hey, are we just doing this because this is, air quotes, part of the process, but the value it's adding in this case, if it were to work, is very, very little? Maybe you should be having conversations. Maybe it's not actually dropping your quality by not doing this. Maybe you should have a conversation and do the analysis to say, like, what gain are we getting in this scenario by running it? Because if it's just doing it because this is the standard process and there's no value add, if you go through that analysis, you could be proving that it's not actually skipping anything that's going to add value. My point here is that, like, what are you beeping at? There's literally no... Oh, no. There's no one in front of me. The idea is essentially looking at other ways to go accomplish the goal that you have. And while I was saying it can feel like extra work, right? It's not really planned for. And now you're like, ah, shit, I have to go figure out how to do this. While that seems like it sucks, the thing that's really nice about it is that it puts you back in the driver's seat. It can be really frustrating to be blocked on other teams or other people waiting for things. So in this case, you need your testing infrastructure to come back and you're like, I can't do my job, this sucks. But I think sometimes what happens is people get used to, like, these things happening. And if they don't take ownership, it just becomes like a commonplace thing. Like, oh yeah, the testing infra's down, like, sucks. Yeah, okay. Guess my work will just keep getting pushed. Like, there's a good excuse for it, right? The testing infra's down. But like, it just becomes kind of easy to fall back to that, is what I'm saying. But instead, when you have ownership, it's like, it's not just making excuses or blaming things. And the reason I want to keep hammering at this is because my point is not to say that, like, there is no responsibility of the other team. Sure, like, they have a responsibility in this example I keep using. They're responsible for their infra. Yeah, they should be accountable to that stuff. But that's outside of your control. You raised awareness to them. Great, good job. You still got shit you got to deliver. So being someone that can take ownership is going to be demonstrating that you're reliable and accountable to the things that you were assigned. And this can really stand out because I said this at the end of the video, I think it was yesterday, but, like, people want people on their team that they can really rely on for this kind of stuff. Because when you have a team filled with people that are the other way, where it's just, oh, like, doesn't work, yeah, not my problem, I guess I just have to wait, like, everything will always constantly slip, especially as the systems that you're working in, your environment becomes more complex. Everything will always slip. Instead, you want to have people that are constantly like, that's not working? Cool. What are we doing instead? What's the goal we're trying to achieve? How are we going to do it instead? How do we get creative here and make it happen? And in my opinion, that was another one of the key pieces that senior engineers really do and shine compared to mid-level. Again, not that mid-levels cannot do it, but it's like, I would expect that seniors are doing this kind of thing. So, just got to CrossFit. I hope that helps. Just maybe a slightly different twist on how that stuff looks. So, thanks for watching. Again, if you have questions that you want answered, leave them in the comments or send a message to DevLeader on social media. DevLeader is my main YouTube channel with more polished, edited videos and on software engineering topics and then programming tutorials in C#. So, thanks for watching. I'll see you next time. Take care.